You know what? Let's skip the preamble and get right into this preview. I'm one of the insanely lucky people who got The Last of Us Part 2 review code early. Here's my tweet confirming it, installed on my PS4 Pro. Now, it's important to note that that screenshot is the only capture I'm allowed to produce, at least at this point. All of the footage you're going to see today is B-roll. However, and this is a big however, I'm also probably one of the very few folks in the world who's actually finished their first playthrough on the 5th and hardest difficulty level available in the game right now. Survivor. Perfect world? I would have gone with Grounded because that's my jam. But said jam wasn't available at the time. It'll be along shortly in a patch, I'm told. But anyway, what I am allowed to do today is to speak very specifically about one section of the game, and one section alone. No exceptions, pain of death stuff. Any of you who already watched the recent State of Play video will know this section already as the quote-unquote extended gameplay that sort of hangs off the end of that presentation. The difference here is the combat area of that part of the game is actually twice the size of what you're shown, and I basically did the opposite of what Naughty Dog's player did, and on Survivor difficulty, which translates into bugger all ammo and crafting materials, plus the enemies react faster and hit much, much harder. And you know what? There's also a few difficult quirks and AI wrinkles in there as well that I'm just going to explain in a sec. Last thing before we begin, unlike most of the vids on my channel, this one is going to have me talking a lot. If you want the gameplay without the conversation over the top, man, I don't blame you. There's a link in the description to that raw footage. Go have at it. Okay, so now that we have all that housekeeping out of the way, let's do some start-stop analysis on what Naughty Dog's demoer has done in this section of the game, and I'll try to explain how I went about things differently. One thing I want to highlight here are the weapons Ellie's going in with. You've got your semi-auto pistol and the bow, and it looks like she has the second long weapon holster unlocked, which means she can quick swap to that glorious shotgun. Now, all of these guns can be upgraded at a workbench, of course, and you know what? Allow me to shut up for a second and I'll just show you what that looks like. Okay, let's continue. Now, it'd be pretty obvious at this point that Ellie can swim because she hasn't drowned like a brick, as opposed to the first game where she would. I was quite pleased with the swimming mechanics because I've known a lot of games over the decades that have cocked them up royally. You can leisurely breaststroke along, holding the left stick forward, or holding what is usually the sprint/dodge button, L1, will make you do this faster freestyle stroke. You'll see in a second that Ellie can dive down, and I'll explain a few things about that. First off, descending is achieved by holding crouch, or circle. Ascending is done with the jump button, which is X. I'm not sure if the air meter you have is more lenient across different difficulties, but on Survivor, it sort of appears as this blue semicircle that eventually turns red. And I took it upon myself to count how long I could stay underwater. It was roughly about 16 seconds, which sounds more generous than it is. I should also like to say that I didn't find any perks that upgrade that. I haven't seen them. Lastly, before we do some shanking here, I should mention that the enemies on Survivor will see you pretty much as plain as day underwater. Not only is it not much camouflage, but water does very little to throw their aim off, and it doesn't really mitigate bullet damage either. So I don't think you're safe. Now, if you're just joining The Last of Us as a series, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this next exchange is exceptionally violent. Honestly, it's just the tip of the iceberg for this sequel. Once again, I'm forbidden about expanding upon that, but yeah. Trust me, this is nothing. This is barely confronting. And hey, speaking of violence, there's a cool little Easter egg here. Ellie's victim is playing Hotline Miami on PS Vita, which is a bloodthirsty little game in its own right, and you should totally buy it because it's great. Just a quick pause here because scavenging is a huge deal on Survivor. Ellie's scooping up one precious bullet here for a semi-auto, along with a bolt. Now, the latter is the currency you'll use for upgrading weapons, and whoever is demoing this is just not being thorough in this area, because just around this corner are more supplies that could be used to make more explosives, and there's a tiny little room behind us with stuff as well. But not much, because Survivor hands you just hardly anything. Okay, one little trip up these stairs and we're going to enter one of the main, what I like to call, combat puzzle sections of the game.
Boat's away. Word is we're almost wrapped up.
Good. I got my girl waiting for him for Bob.
You shit.
Watch this guy bringing up the rear, because I've compared my Survivor footage to this, and he does something in mine animation-wise that he doesn't do in this lower difficulty setting. In my playthrough, he doesn't keep his eyes forward, nor does he sort of casually glance up to the right there. What he did on my difficulty was do this little turn to walk backwards a step or two. And it wasn't because he was responding to anything that I was doing. He just does that on Survivor. And I saw little quirks like that happen a bunch of times. An enemy will either sort of break patrol form to glance behind them, or maybe throw a sideways glance into a cover position that's sort of perpendicular to them, or even under a vehicle. So yeah, it's just a really interesting feature that will keep you on your toes, because no kidney stab or hiding spot is 100% guaranteed. Now, as for the crafting materials, this player is incredibly well stocked, which also leads me to believe that this is just a lower difficulty. I'm an economical player by nature. I snoop every corner. I treasure my ammo, I'm not wasteful. Be all that as it may, I did not even have half of what this guy has when he walked into this place. Like this dude is rich. And look, some of these items are familiar for returning players and some of them aren't. You have your medikit, you have your Molotovs, the stun bomb is new. It's incredibly useful to just stun a group of foes, so either you can just go charging in and get stabby, or you can do a Batman and just disappear from a bad situation. The trap mine, I cannot speak highly enough of. It's basically a super high damage landmine that just shreds limbs off. I mean, we're going to talk about dogs in a second, but I just have to say now, I effectively use trap mines along with my own scent to sort of lure dogs and their handlers into a kill box somewhere in the level and just explode everyone. It works a treat. Anyway, last of all, we have craftable silencers that sort of fit your pistol, not the revolver that you have. Attaching them is as simple as holding triangle when you're aiming the gun. Don't get too excited about these because they last maybe 2 or 3 shots before they'll break. You can use some of your perk pills, I'm going to call them, to improve that durability. And now just rounding things out, if Ellie had a melee weapon on her at this point, she could make it extra nasty and extra durable with this option. Plus, you can craft your own arrows in the field, which is fantastic because on Survivor, it feels like they break like 70-80% of the time and can't be retrieved. Actually, speaking of which, this footage doesn't seem to have the explosive arrows unlocked. I'm just going to do a quick cutaway to a clip that shows Ellie getting her Rambo on. Sorry to pause again, but here's an important difference between my approach to this level and what the demoer does. I went right down this right flank of the level. The demoer decides to go left and into a building section that I didn't even know existed until I watched this. And look, the reason I didn't go down there is because you'd be nuts to go down that way on Survivor. It's also worth noting that down the center here is a dude with a dog, supported by an elevated sharpshooter, who will spot your ass like that. You're going to see him in a minute. Alright, unpause. Take note of how quickly this demoer takes his or her shot. If they'd waited any longer than that, Ellie would have done this sort of mini animation where she flicks the hammer back on the pistol. Now in a second I'm going to show you why that little animation is a bit of a challenge.
Not after what went down last time. Even Isaac isn't that crazy.
That's what I heard.
There's the ability to stealth kill and take hostages. I didn't do too much of the latter, as it's mainly a go loud sort of tactic. I would have liked the ability to drag bodies into the grass, but it's not in Ellie's MO, so you just can't. Oh, there we go, there's listen mode in action. That sits on R1. And I gotta say, it's kind of weird that it's actually included in Survivor difficulty in this sequel. Veterans will know that Survivor difficulty on the original just had listen mode disabled, so it's just odd. I barely use the thing. Okay, so instant replay here. Watch how the aim jukes upward when Ellie does the thumb thing. Now the flow on here is that it's going to force you really need to take a shot to a certain rhythm. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it better than that. It's interesting. Now it's also worth noting that the person we just shot is named Charlotte. And we know this because the enemies in the game often shriek out the names of the dearly departed. You're going to hear that a lot. Yep, good. Quick melee weapon upgrade there. This 2x4 is now going to adjust some serious attitudes. Actually, on that topic, I'm just going to be quiet for a second and just quickly cut to a lengthy close combat encounter.
Push forward!
Okay, back again. And just on the enemy name thing that we were talking about earlier, the dog that's about to get lit up in a second even has a name. In my playthrough, I blew him up with a trip mine and somebody mourned him. Apparently his name is Bear. Sorry, Bear, but you ripped my throat out like 3 times. I did what I had to do. Alright, something else to note here, running and jumping. Basic platforming is now a big part of combat. It doesn't go to Nathan Drake levels of, you know, swinging off ropes to punch people in the face sort of levels. Oh, there's a quick flick on the left D-pad to change the bow. And I've got to say that charged to full draw strength real quick. So I'm assuming they bought the perk for that. And look, like I said earlier, I snuck in on the complete opposite side of this hospital beyond this dude. There's like a section, which I guess you could describe as like an office area. You can basically get into like a cat and mouse cover hopping scenario. Yep, same deal as the last shot. The bow usually requires twice as much time to go full draw, so that's totally been upgraded. Also take note of how Ellie mutters things after a kill. It's this deliberate, cool little reassurance to you, the player, sort of telling you that, okay, that was a clean kill and nobody got tipped off. You're all good. Okay, no way will you get this amount of time to line up a shot out of cover in Survivor. This would almost be like an instant spotting, a yell from the enemy, and you'd have a new speed hole in your chest before you could even loose an arrow. She would have shrieked an alarm by now, and the proverbial hornet's nest would just have piss all over it. I reckon this is a good shot under pressure. There's quite a few of these in this, because the usual sort of aiming sway has been lessened with perks. If you have those, your reticle doesn't do this sort of slow, lazy figure 8 drag.
I found her!
Boom, right in the kisser. Alright, you'd be very lucky to do that and to get the upper hand in that situation on a harder difficulty. A shot would have come your way a lot sooner, and you, if you were lucky, maybe you would have tapped L1 to sort of juke to the side, and then you would have given his noggin a flogging. Alright, this bit is worth noting as well. You can totally opt out of combat areas if you're smart. The idea is you just go loud somewhere nearby, draw everybody to you, and then just sprint to the exit point, and hopefully you have enough time to just shoulder through this door. It is high risk stuff, and of course, another big downside is you're just going to be forfeiting all of the crafting materials in the zone. And you know what? We're sort of exiting the main action section of this, so I'm just going to let this run. And hopefully this video preview has given you some insight into what to expect when you crank things up. The review embargo for this is way before launch. I'm going to be one of the first up with my impressions on the channel, so there's that. Feel free to ask any further questions in the comments. Just understand now that I can't speak about anything outside of this section of the game. Once again, pain of death. So yeah, don't be offended if I don't respond to certain things. Anyway, I think that's more than enough from me. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you soon.
Maybe if you put some more guards, Abby would see it herself.
What the fuck was Abby here?
I'm not stupid. You're gonna tell us where she went.
When Isaac talks to us about this...
I'm getting tired of this.
Nora. Nora! I'm not going down for her, man.
Don't scream. Put that shit down. You remember me? Yeah. You remember me.